The night he thought would mark the beginning of a perfect future became the moment his entire past came crashing back to life. Adrian Cole, a billionaire CEO known for his cold precision and unshakable control, stood in the sterile white hallway of a hospital, his expensive suit suddenly feeling suffocating, his heartbeat louder than the distant beeping machines, because just a few steps away, lying on a hospital bed, was the woman he once loved, and the child he never knew existed. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of fate, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Stories like this deserve to be felt together. Adrian had built his empire from nothing, climbing from a broken childhood into a world of wealth where emotions were liabilities and attachments were weaknesses. Love, to him, had always been temporary, until he met Emily Carter. She was not extraordinary in the way the world defined it, but to Adrian, she had been everything he didn't know he needed. She had a quiet strength, a softness that didn't break under pressure, and a way of seeing him not as the powerful CEO, but as the man hiding behind it. For the first time, he had felt understood, and that terrified him. Their love had been intense, almost reckless, but Adrian's fear of vulnerability slowly poisoned it. He began to withdraw, to question her intentions, to convince himself that she would eventually leave like everyone else. The night everything ended was cold and unforgiving, much like the words he had spoken. He had accused her of trying to trap him, of being just like the others who wanted his wealth. Emily hadn't argued. She hadn't screamed. She had simply looked at him with a quiet heartbreak that spoke louder than any words, and then she left. What Adrian never knew, what he never allowed himself to consider, was that she hadn't just left with a broken heart. She had left carrying his child. Years passed, and Adrian buried himself in work. Success came easily, but peace never did. He convinced himself he had made the right choice, that emotions only complicated things. Yet, in quiet moments, when the world wasn't watching, he would remember her laugh, the way she used to look at him like he was still human. He never tried to find her. Pride, guilt, and fear formed an unbreakable wall. The night everything changed, Adrian wasn't even supposed to be at the hospital. He had come for a business partner who had fallen ill, expecting a quick visit before returning to his meticulously planned life. But fate didn't ask for permission. As he walked past a room with its door slightly open, a small figure caught his eye. A boy, no older than 5, sat on a chair beside the bed, his tiny hands holding onto the edge as if afraid to let go. There was something hauntingly familiar about him, the shape of his eyes, the curve of his jaw, the way he frowned in concentration. Adrian slowed down, his steps uncertain for the first time in years. Then he saw her. Emily lay on the bed, pale but still undeniably the same woman who had once been his entire world. Time had changed her, but it hadn't erased her. His chest tightened, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. The boy turned his head, and their eyes met. It was like looking into a mirror of the past, a reflection of himself in a life he had never known. The realization didn't come gently. It hit him all at once, brutal and undeniable. The child was his. Adrian stepped into the room, his mind racing, his carefully constructed world unraveling with every heartbeat. Emily noticed him almost instantly. Her eyes widened, not with joy, but with a quiet, guarded shock. She had imagined this moment countless times, but reality was far more complicated than any dream or nightmare. The silence between them was heavy, filled with years of unspoken words, regrets, and questions that had no easy answers. Adrian wanted to say something, anything, but for once in his life, words failed him. All the power, all the confidence he commanded in boardrooms meant nothing here. His gaze kept returning to the boy, who was now watching him with cautious curiosity. There was no doubt anymore. This was his son. A child who had grown, laughed, cried, and lived an entire life without him. The weight of what he had lost, and what he had unknowingly abandoned, crushed him. Emily's voice, when it finally came, was calm but distant. She didn't accuse him. She didn't demand explanations. That hurt more than anything else. Because it meant she had already accepted a life without him, had already moved on in the only way she could, by becoming strong enough not to need him. Adrian learned that Emily had raised their son alone, working tirelessly, sacrificing everything to give him a stable life. There had been nights she went to bed hungry so he could eat, days she smiled through exhaustion so he wouldn't worry. She had never tried to contact Adrian again, not because she didn't want to, but because she respected the choice he had made when he pushed her away. And now, she was in that hospital bed because she had worked herself beyond her limits. Guilt became something tangible inside Adrian, something he could almost touch. Who had everything, had given nothing to the two people who needed him most. Days turned into nights as Adrian found himself returning to that hospital room again and again. At first, Emily resisted his presence, keeping her guard up, unwilling to let him disrupt the fragile peace she had built. But their son, Ethan, was different. Children don't understand pride or regret the way adults do. He saw Adrian not as a man who had been absent, but as someone new, someone interesting, someone who, in a strange way, felt familiar. A tense laughter began to fill the spaces that had once been heavy with silence. Adrian found himself sitting beside him, listening to his stories, watching the way his eyes lit up over the simplest things. It was a world Adrian had never known, a kind of joy that couldn't be bought or controlled. For the first time in his life, Adrian felt something stronger than ambition. He felt responsibility. But turning a place in their lives wasn't easy. Emily made that clear without saying it directly. Trust, once broken, didn't return overnight. Adrian had to prove, not with words, but with actions, that he was no longer the man who had let fear destroy everything. He began to change, not for business, not for reputation, but for them. He rearranged his priorities, stepped back from deals that once consumed him, and learned what it meant to truly be present. He stayed at the hospital, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He learned how to comfort Ethan when he got scared, how to sit in silence with Emily without forcing anything. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the walls between them began to soften. Emily started to see the man Adrian was trying to become, not the one he used to be. She saw the way he looked at Ethan, not with obligation, but with awe. She saw the regret in his eyes, the quiet determination to make things right, even if it took the rest of his life. And Adrian, he began to understand that love wasn't about control or certainty. It was about showing up, even when it was hard, even when you weren't sure you deserved to be there. Just before we reach the ending, I want to ask you something special. Drop a comment saying second chances exist if you believe people can truly change. The day Emily was finally discharged from the hospital felt like a new beginning, not just for her, but for all of them. As they walked out together, Ethan holding both their hands, there was no grand declaration, no dramatic promise. Just the quiet understanding that they would try, together. Adrian knew he couldn't erase the past. He couldn't undo the years he had missed. But he could be there now. He could choose them, every single day. And sometimes, that's what redemption looks like, not perfection, not instant forgiveness, but the willingness to stay, to fight, and to love despite everything. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life, and you never know who might need to hear that second chances are still possible.